everyone! Ever wondered what's going on inside this box when you click the shutter button? And I don't mean only the click sound. I mean, what does the camera sensor see? It's not what you think, and today we are going on a journey from a single photon of light to a final beautiful photograph. Hi, I'm Edwin Braun and welcome to the channel of CBIS Visual Technology Inc. As a photographer myself, I'm working with my team on an application called metaSort. I spend a lot of time working with digital photos. metaSort is our tool that helps photographers instantly organize and find their images using powerful metadata and non-destructive AI. Check it out at the link in the description. Developing metaSort naturally demands that I have to work with thousands of raw files. A common question I get is, what are raw files and why do all pros insist on using them? More important question, should you use them? To illustrate the craziness of raw files, I've built two dedicated tools specifically for this video to reveal your camera's secret. Okay, so first things first, let's turn this around. Before we can understand raw files, we need to understand how the camera sensor works and what we actually get from the camera sensor. Did you know that a camera sensor is colorblind? It can only measure one thing, and that's the intensity of light, not its color. To enable color vision for the sensor, microscopic colored dyes or pigments are used. Those color filters let only specific wavelengths of light come through. This is called a Bayer filter. It's a simple grid of red, green and blue filters. They are arranged in a special array, but more of that later. This color filtering works exactly like your 1920s anaglyph 3D paper glasses, if you can remember those. Those 3D paper glasses also had filters, color filters. So they had a red, blue or red-green filter. And do not confuse them with the polarization filters that we have now in modern theaters, 3D theaters that is. So let's move on to how this actually works. So the big question is, what does the sensor actually record through its color filters? Let's take a look what a Bayer filter sensor actually sees and how it records images. Unless you have a raster electron microscope, you won't be able to see the individual pixels in a sensor because they are really tiny. However, I built an application that will allow you to understand and show these Bayer filters. Let me just bring up my application I developed especially for this video. And this application is kind of my raster electron microscope that shows us the actual Bayer sensor filter. Let's just have a look. Let me just bring up my workstation. And this is my actual application running here on my workstation. We can see on the left side, we have here our raw image file. And it looks a little bit strange, yes. And that's the nature of raw files. And I will explain more later. Let's have a look on the right side here. This here, let me just pick a spot in here. This actually represents our Bayer filter. And we can see, let me just zoom in so that we can actually see what's going on our camera sensor. So we have these weird green, red, blue filters. All these pixels, red, green, and if you look from in scan lines, we can see there's blue, green, blue, green, blue, green, and green, red, green, red, green, red, and again, blue, green, blue, green, blue, green. The Bayer filters are organized in a 2x2 or 4x4 block. Doesn't actually matter how they do all these filtering. It's just that we have two greens, and that's a very important thing modern camera sensors have, is they're using two greens because the human eye is very sensitive to green through the evolution of vision we are more receptive for green. And that's why the camera manufacturers thought, hey, that's a great idea. Let's just add 2 green sensors so we can capture these green shades as well. Now let's have a little bit of, let's do a little bit of exploring. So we have, let's go here, is the hot spot. So what we can see down here, let me just zoom out a little bit, is our hotspot where we get really bright spots. And we can actually see when I zoom into this bright white, let's see, there's a little bit of grass in front of here. Let's move up here. So now we can see we have fully saturated, fully energy levels or light levels. So a full red. When I click here, we can actually see the values, the raw file recorded here. So when I click here, we have a value of 0.6. Here we have a value of 0.7, value of 0.8, a value of 1, which is the highest value right now in the image format I have here. This is the highest value it can go. 1 means the sensor was fully loaded with light energy. So our highest value for any of the red, green, and blue sensors is 1.0. And as we can see, it fluctuates a little bit, even though we can only see here a white. But we actually, in the raw file, we have a little bit of differentiation. We have a red value of 0.7398. Again, the blue is 1 and the green is also 1. So we have a pretty blown out highlight here. And what that means is it can't go higher than 1. So that means it's just a blown out highlight we have here. Let's have a look at the sky, if the sky behaves similar. And here we can see, yes, we have the green component at full and the red here. Let's have another look. Blue as well at 1. So this is also blown out. So we can reduce that. We can possibly recover some color because the other components are still there. So if we reduce these intensities, we could recover the blue sky if we're lucky. Let's go into this area again and see how this whole thing works here. This is the recording of our Bayer sensor. So everything that's bright, we can easily see, okay, we get full sensor information, a blue, a full green, and a full red. So let's just go back in here. And this is done in, obviously, in all areas or places of our images. So now the big question is, how on earth can we get from this strange picture we have here to our real image? Because what we actually want to see, let me just go, is a real picture with the real colors and everything we see here, we want to see. So how can we do that? How can we get from a raw file to a real image file? And what's actually happening is, let me just turn slowly the process of raw development or demosaicing. Let me turn this in. And now we can see how this works. All the colors, so when we go let me just find this spot here. Let's say this. From all the colors we have, red, blue, and green here, and 2 greens, what does that mean? We need to get somehow, the red needs to get color components, because remember, we have a red pixel, but at this position, we want to know what was the blue, what was the green. So how can we get from this raster to our original colors we expect to see in here? So when I go here, so how can I get a color at the red spot here, a color at the blue spot here, at the green here? So where do we get this color information? Because all we get in our camera sensor is 1 red, 1 green, 1 blue. So what's actually happening is the camera has a very fast camera processor, is able to just look at this red pixel, for example, and it will look around. What does the blue pixel look next to me? What does the green pixel look next to me? What does this look, and so on. So it will look around this pixel and just guess or interpolate what is the blue component, what is the green component of that pixel. Really great thing about that is one pixel can now capture two other colors. So we saved a lot of material on our camera sensor. And we have the full pixel resolution for RGB because the other components can be reconstructed from the neighbor around this pixel. And there's a lot of fancy mathematics methods going on how you can reconstruct the missing components. In the case of blue, you want the red and green. So how to reconstruct that? There's a lot of things you can do because some algorithms are that clever. They even look for a sharp transition, a corner, and then they only go until they have the sharp transition, or they look especially into the transition area and weigh somehow, okay, the missing component needs to be that amount. That's how the camera sensor records your actual digital images in a raw file. The raw file is always the base, and the file image you see is always a processed one. You never see the raw file, and the raw files are actually not really great to look at because they're way too dark and have strange colors. In the end, you need to somehow process. Either you do the processing or your camera does the processing for you and just decides how the image should look like. That's why the pros, they want to have and work with raw files, because then they have, so to say, a memory, a capture of all the rich image data, and then they can decide at any time how to develop this picture. And this is very powerful because you can make or create out of one picture, you can create many developed pictures that have different styles and look different. So that's a very powerful function or feature of RAW files. Everyone should shoot in RAW files if possible, if your camera supports it. And most cameras now support it. Even the latest iPhones, they can now shoot in RAW. And the RAW file is the base, the foundation of everything we have onwards. Let's dive into how a RAW file actually looks like. So now we learned how the camera sensor creates its image and how it sees. All this data we just saw, the values, the intensity values, the RGB values, are created with the demosaicing, and that means out of the Bayer pattern, we get out an RGB image. And those values are stored in either floating point format or integer format, but they are stored in a much higher detail than a normal JPEG image that we all know, for example, from a web browser or from the web. The question is now, what happens when you have a RAW file? Why can't you use that on, let's say, for example, for an image on the web? First, RAW files, because they have so much data in it, they are huge. RAW files, when you unpack them, they are easily 60 megabytes or even more, depending on your camera. Those files are great, they have all the data, but they are not really good and nice to share or put on the web. Somehow you need to develop these RAW files into JPEG images or any other lower based integer file format. How can we do that? And for that, I have created another tool, Linear Explorer or Tone Explorer tool, that allows me to show you what's inside a RAW file when we actually get it processed and all the Bayer pixel stuff is removed and we get the real information, the real data in our file. The first thing you will notice is that the RAW files, they always look wrong and they always look way too dark. And that's because a camera sensor does not work like a human eye. A human eye works chemical based. So it's like very early days of photography. You need chemicals in your eye. The human eye works on a chemical process, which is way different from the electronic process we just discussed in our camera sensor. To top it off, the chemical process in our eyes does not work in a linear way. Doubling the brightness does not mean that we think this is double the brightness we perceive as a human. And that's kind of an issue when you store in a linear way, because mathematically and how sensors are working, that's much easier. You need to find a way from your linear way to simulate kind of what we perceive, the perception of a human eye. And this can be done with special functions and tools. And let me just bring my second tool I developed especially to show you this process. Just move here, and that's my Tone Explorer. I loaded raw file into my tool, and we can see it looks very dark and not really usable as an image on a web page. Unless you want to say, hey, I took this picture at night, which is not true because we can see stuff there. It's not usable in this form. On top of it, we can also see right now that our raw file, even though it doesn't look right now good, it is also on top of it very strange. When we look at the histogram up here in the right upper corner, we can see our luminance, so that's the illumination, the brightness of our pixels, looks very strange. We have nothing on the right side here. So all the areas starting around 0.5 to 1, and I remember I told you 1.0 in how I save the pictures here, is the maximum power, the maximum light we can record. So that would be pure white. Actually, this thing tells us there is no pure white. So first you would think there is no pure white. But remember, we are talking about raw files. And the raw files, they just record whatever intensity values they receive. Even if we stop it down very dramatically, close down our aperture, when we stop it down really extreme, the sensor is still able to pick up a variation of energies or illumination levels. This means, in that case, half of our image is actually lost in the sensor. So the sensor had to work hard to cramp everything into the darker area. And we can see this is the amount of pixels at this level. We have a lot of black pixels here, and we have a lot of pixels around the value of 0.2, and then it goes down, and we have some pixels at a value of 0.5. However, what does this mean? It actually means that our 0.5 just becomes the white. Still, we can see some bright areas or bright spots here. All the other pixels are shifted around what the values the camera has measured. And this shows us a highly underexposed image. So this underexposed image is usually lost. If that were a JPEG image, it's lost. You can't recover or do anything with it. It's lost data. Because we're using a raw file from our camera, we can do some tricks and things. For example, the easiest we can do is we can just multiply our pixel values. So we can brighten it up, so to say. So we can say, okay, dear camera, I know I did a mistake and I underexposed it. Let's just bump all the values up so that I get my real range or real values back. That's one way to do it, but you can see we run into the issue that our 0.5 hits the ceiling very fast and we burn out all our highlights. So we can't do that really in an extreme way. So let me just go back to 1.0 value where we started at, and let me show you another function. I just turned on perceptual view. That's what I was talking about, that the human eye uses a chemical process to expose on the retina the world we see. This perceptual view simulates exactly the human eye. So the human eye would see actually the raw data like this. Ignore the colors and contrast values right now. I didn't want to create a photo editing application right now. This is just for explanation of raw file and what data is in there. But still, you get the idea of the human eye sees differently. When the camera sensor records double the energy for the human, that doesn't mean it's double the brightness. When we go in this more of a perceptual view or logarithmic view, the human eye actually sees that. And now when we do the same trick here with our multiplication, we can recover much more. And as I mentioned, this is not a advanced photo editing tool to work with raw files. But I hope you get the idea how we can manipulate these kind of images. And let me just bring in another image I want to show you. So I brought in this picture. I hope you can remember it from the very first experiment we did with the bias sensor, so that we learned how these color filters on the sensor create the image information and the colors. This image, same deal. It's not usable. If that were a JPEG image, we're lost. Black is black. Nothing we can recover or see in our image. Same deal. Oh, before I do the perceptual view, let me just show or discuss the histogram here. The energy histogram we have up here in the right corner, it's nearly perfect. We have only some spikes in the 1.0, that's the burned out, and the sky is burned out. Sometimes you just have to live with that because your cameras can't capture the whole dynamic range. It's pretty decent, so we have still a lot on the black side. That's obviously because I tried to reduce the bright spots a little bit so that I can still get a decent picture out of it. However, this darkens down obviously all the natural darker areas. Because we have a raw file, we can get the darker areas back. And yes, if you overdo it, you get some grain and noise. If you're leveling it out in the right way, you can actually recover a lot of information without any issue. And again, just a reminder, what I built here is not a photo editing tool. You would use a photo editing tool to develop raw files. Or maybe you want to try out our metaSort, which can also do a proper development of raw files. You can see how drastic the effect is. In the raw file, we have still the same data, a lot of dark pixels here. This information, we can grab all this fine information, this fine detail, simulate how a human would see this information, the brightness change and all this important stuff we want to have in our images. So that's just one other example. And now let me just do one more example just to drive my point home. And here is another example of a really bad exposed picture or image. You can see it already in the histogram up here. And also here, our brightest spot is 0.6. And probably our brightest spot is one little speck, because even the histogram was not able to count more than these pixels here. A very bad picture. And again, this image would be lost if that were a JPEG. No way to do anything with the image. However, again, just when we apply our human vision curve, we can repair or get a lot of information back from this image. And then we can also try to just brighten it up. And we can see there is one point where we have this burning out effect where we lose our sky. So here was a very bright spot. So we have to be careful how much we want to add on that. And again, this is not a photo imaging application. Still, bringing my point home, with raw files, you actually have something stored on your hard drive that you can revisit at any time and create new images out of it. From the same shot, you can develop various different looks and images out of it. So this is why you should also work only with raw files. If you take it seriously, you're taking pictures, work with raw files and use those raw files in all your picture taking efforts. Let me now come back and close and finalize the loop of what we have learned. And let me bring back my main view here. To conclude this video, let's just recap. Did we learn something? I hope you learned something. I hope you learned what raw files are, how the camera sensor creates those files, and why they are so powerful and why you should always shoot in RAW. Many modern cameras allow you to shoot in JPEG and RAW. So if you need a quick result out of it, yes, go ahead, activate your JPEG creation option. I strongly suggest that you shoot in RAW and save your files in RAW, because at any time you can come back and change and redevelop them. Understanding your RAW files is one thing, but managing 10,000s of images, especially RAW files, is quite a task. And if you feel like you're drowning in your photos and can't find anything of your best work, I've got something from you. That's exactly why we developed metaSort. I had the same issue. I have thousands, 10,000s of images and pictures. And I know I shot an image of someone sitting on a bicycle or someone sitting on a hot rod. I know exactly I took this picture. It was several years ago. I know exactly I took this picture, but I can't find it. Whatever I tried, it's not working. And yes, I understand there's cloud services out there like Google, like Apple is doing, or many others. I will never use those cloud services to manage my data, my personal data. And especially when I do it as a professional, no way I will upload any commercial or professional work to those cloud servers. Yes, they have these really fancy thing where you can search, show me pictures with a car, show me pictures with a red hat, show me pictures with a cable, and all this kind of stuff. Guess what? We did the same amazing AI search capability, but without any cloud service. You can do it all on your own machine. No one will ever know what images you are using. You don't have to share any information at all. And our metaSort is specially built for privacy. So all your work stays on your hard drive. Yes, that adds a little bit of complexity. You have to get a USB drive where you store your stuff or get more hard disk space. However, just do the calculations. Using a cloud service is much more expensive and they will abuse your pictures. If not now, they will abuse them in the future. They will use them to train their own AI. Don't let them do that. Keep everything under control. It's your data. You should control this data. And even when it gets to image manipulation, modern applications send your image to the cloud, do the manipulation and send it back. Using external providers on your images, even just for development of the images, is not a good idea in my opinion. This is why I really think you should check out metaSort and try what we can do for you. It's an amazing tool. And yes, you have to use your own processing power to first create a database of your pictures, then categorize these pictures and so on. You will get something really powerful. You can search for images that are too dark. You can search for images that are low resolution, high resolution, panorama, non-panorama. You can even train your own system on faces so you can find images of your loved ones. And no one will ever get the biometrics. Only you have it. I really recommend have a look at metaSort. We have a free version of metaSort that allows you to just try out with 500 images and you can try out everything. And it's cheap. It's so freaking cheap. Just check it out. And we put a link in the video. Thanks so much for watching this video today. Hope this cleared up some of the mysteries behind raw image files and how they are created and what you can do with raw files. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the technology of photography. See you in the next one. Goodbye.